Okay, so today we're going to be looking at correlation. Correlation is basically the relationship between two variables and how closely related two variables are. Now, all of the situations that we're going to be looking at are not perfectly linear, which is more real life. So if I took data down, like so for example, maybe I recorded everyone's height in the room and their shoe size, then there wouldn't be a perfect linear graph. So just because you maybe are tall, that doesn't necessarily mean that your shoe size is big. So while that we think there might be a relationship between those two things, it won't be perfectly linear most likely. So we're going to talk about, there's 5 different types, so I kind of have this set up and you can set it up the same way. We're going to put this in our journal. So for example, right here, the first type we're going to talk about looks like this. So looking at that data, you can see it's not perfectly linear, but it actually looks like it's going to be somewhat linear. And if I had to draw a line, the dots would be pretty close to that line. And so what we call this, and you don't need that circle around it, but what we call this is actually strong, because the relationship between the variables is pretty strong, and it's positive. And positive means that as one variable increases, so does the other variable. So for example, if I drew a line, it would be a line that had a positive slope. So that's why we call it strong positive. And some examples of this might be, like I mentioned, height and shoe size. Another example might be the amount of food you order and the tip you leave, because there'd be probably a larger tip, because with the amount of food that you're ordering, there'd be a larger bill. So the larger your bill is, the more your tip is. That tends to be the case. So that is strong positive. What about if I had a situation though that looked like this? So the relationship again is pretty closely tied, but this time one thing is different. If I had to draw a line, it would actually be decreasing. So what do we think we'd call this? Call this strong, because it's almost linear. Oops, sorry. But it would be negative, because if I drew a line, the slope would be negative. And some examples of this might be your bank account and number of trips to the mall. Or some people like to say the age after 50 and your height, because some people tend to shrink a little bit. Okay, so that might be something that's strong negative. So the next thing that we're actually going to look at is going to be, what do you think about that situation? So the general pattern is actually going in this direction, so it'd be what? Yes, it'd be positive, but is the connection really strong? Not really. There's less of a connection. It's less linear looking, and probably the points are further away from a line that you could draw. So we're actually going to call this weak positive. You could probably think of some examples that are weak positive. So energy you have and sleep you get. Because not everyone has that direct correlation between their energy level and the sleep they get. People can maybe do with different levels of sleep. So maybe we'd consider that weak positive. But we would say that your energy would go up probably the more sleep you get. Not everyone. Okay, and then you can probably imagine what's left. So if this is weak positive, I wonder what's coming next. Yeah, it's going to be weak negative. There we go. And something that maybe would be weak negative, you guys maybe would think of some better examples than me. That would be something that would be decreasing, but not necessarily with a strong correlation. Might be maybe I have here age after 5 and the amount of hair that you have. I don't know about that, that's from last year. Age after 5 and the amount of hair. Guess because as you get older, potentially you lose hair, but age after 5, maybe age after 25, let's do that. Age after 25, an amount of hair. I don't know how soon people start losing hair. All right, and then the last one, you may have guessed it. It looks like this. Does there look like there's any kind of pattern here? So we're going to say it has no correlation. So a few tips for no correlation. So maybe this is ice cream you eat. And your hair length would probably not have much correlation. So one thing that's maybe important for you to understand about correlation and just good reminders, you would never say that something just has positive correlation or it has weak correlation or anything like that. You would always give it 2 names. So all of these technically have 2 names. No correlation has 2 words at least, so you can kind of remember it. And I always think about for strong and for weak. The strong makes a skinny cloud, and then the weak makes a wide cloud. So that might help you as well. All right, so that is correlation, and it just basically shows you how closely related 2 variables are.